Ding, ding, ding. Sorry, I don't have a bell, but I have a microphone. It is working. Yes, good, good. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Hope you had a nice lunch. And if you've not been here this morning, welcome to Future of Brands 2023. My name is Omar Oakes, editor of The Media Leader, the sister publication to Ad Wanted Events. We used to be called MediaTel News, and they used to be called MediaTel Events, but that's all gone now. We are one happy Ad Wanted family. Thank you very much for coming. I am definitely not a measurement expert, but what I'm going to do is set the scene for this next session about media measurement. What I am is a media industry journalist, been doing this for a while, and we've been doing a lot on measurement of late. And in response to one particular story we did last week, a contact emailed me to say, wow, measurement is really spicy right now. So I'm here to explain why that is, to set the scene for some of the things that you'll be hearing about more from the real experts this afternoon. So in case you don't know The Media Leader, as I say, we used to be called MediaTel News up until just over a year ago. We are a B2B trade publication for the media industry. This is a screenshot of our homepage yesterday. Typical example of what we do, a mixture of news analysis and opinion pieces in particular, and you'll see that measurement actually comes up quite a bit in our everyday reporting. Some of these stories I may go into in a bit of depth going forward. Before I move on, just in the top right-hand corner, we do keep it a secret somewhat, but we actually have US-facing and France-facing versions of the Media Leader now as well. Our plan is to expand internationally as the company explores going into different territories. And, fingers crossed, we'll be developing an international piece of the Media Leader as well, but more on that in the coming months. The MediaTel link is still really important to what we do, and this is where the measurement piece comes in. So you will be aware of the many different jigs which are active in the UK media industry right now. MediaTel Connected is the MediaTel platform that many of you will be aware of already, where a lot of this data is housed, and as part of having a connected subscription, you get to play around with a lot of this data and use it for meaningful campaign analysis. But you may have your views on what measurement tools you need, and that's part of, if you do ask questions to the panelists this afternoon, a lot of that will feature, I'm sure. But why measurement is hotting up and why it's such an interesting story for us, putting together this presentation, I tried to come up with three kind of different things, but they all came down to money. So really, it's down to money, money, money. A lot of money is going into measurement companies. You'll have seen last year, Nielsen sold to private equity. Goldman Sachs took a position in iSpot. WPP, a number of years ago, in 2019, sold a 60% stake in Kantar to Bain at a $4 billion valuation. Now, what is going on here? We're seeing some longer term trends happen with the death of the cookie, which you all have known and lots of stuff about. Measurements, essentially, where we've gotten to, it's a mixture of what we can track versus what we can model, what we can sample. And so advertising cookies, as great as they were at tracking what online users were doing, the deprecation of the cookie means that the emphasis is more on being able to measure. So these companies that are able to do this, it's attracting a lot of investment. Similar to that, ad budgets are changing. You'll have seen, obviously, SVOD tiers, advertising tiers of SVOD companies, Netflix and Disney Plus, have been launched in the last 6 months. The streaming companies are offering ad platforms. ITVX launched as a replacement for ITV Hub, as a place where digital content will go there first, before linear. And Channel 4 has an interesting revenue share deal with YouTube. So all of these inventory are bundled together in linear and digital. But how do you measure it? How do you compare apples with apples? The pressure is also building for cross-media measurement. CFOs have tasked chief marketing officers, and this is something that came in our brand discussion earlier, of how do you actually deliver real-time measurement, but again, how do you measure across screens and across platforms? And importantly, as we'll get to as well, how do you trade against those standards? The challenge is, well, there are multiple challenges. These are the three that I felt able to talk about based on what we've reported. You'll know that there are many more. It's important, before we get into this, to distinguish between audience measurements and ad campaign measurements. We had an interesting op-ed, which you should all read, by Denise Turner, CEO of Research, who made this point very well, is measuring audience. A lot of what we'll hear is about audience measurements, but actually the feedback from advertisers, from marketers, is we want to measure the ad campaign specifically. They are two different things, so it's important to bear that in mind from what you hear this afternoon. We don't measure, we model. In my research for this, one JIC CEO made that point as well. Again, it comes down to sampling. In lieu of being able to track everyone and survey what everyone does with their marketing, with their media consumption behavior, all we can do is model and sample. How do we do that? And what techniques do we use? For ads specifically, we had this issue of excess frequency. How do we avoid doubling up what we're counting on offline and online channels? We get to some of the solutions that have been offered in the market in a moment, but one of the biggest challenges is actually attribution. Moving beyond how many people were exposed to an ad to actually the impacts that that ad had. You'll have seen a lot has been discussed about how the COVID pandemic has changed marketing activity and media consumption in the last few years. You'll have seen that actually one of the big beneficiaries of TV was the coming onto TV of direct-to-consumer channels. That was really interesting, and what that's actually happened in the measurement space, it's actually led to a number of UK networks offering attribution resources for advertisers. Direct-to-consumer advertisers who've been very accustomed to real-time measurement with online campaigns haven't traditionally been able to do that as they come on TV. So there is even more pressure building for cross-media measurement and offering those same attribution measures. However, as I mentioned before, not being able to use third-party cookies in the same way, if the cookies are fully deprecated, it's going to make tracking that path to purchase more challenging. You might also hear a lot this afternoon about market mix modeling. Again, something I don't know very about, but we report on very much. It sounds very fancy and scientific, but again, as far as I can tell, as an industry journalist covering that space, it essentially comes down to money. So how much cost are advertisers willing to take on these new tools in terms of econometric modeling, econometric analysis, seeing how you turn up the dials of each different up or down a marketing activity? How does that actually impact brand sales performance? The question for us when we're covering this space is how are they or agencies holding them accountable? This issue comes up for a lot for us. There are some tools out there, such as, I just noticed on my icons there's a question mark. That was supposed to be something else. Shout out to ThinkBox, who've actually done some really good work in this space to create these norms for how we measure TV performance versus digital. So, there are solutions in the market. We've talked a bit about some of the research companies which have been targets of acquisition. But there are actually some solutions that media owners have collaborated on and some interesting new trends as well. You'll have no doubt heard lots about attention. Going back to this thing about what do we track versus what do we sample. Attention, how much consumers are actually paying attention to ads and what specifically messages which are more impactful than others. Attention, usually eye tracking, is a very hot topic right now. You'll have heard of these companies, Lumen, Amplified Intelligence, Adelaide. Going forward, what's going to be interesting is actually the work that the media agency groups are doing in this space. You'll have seen last month, Dentsu came out with the new version of effective attention last month. I'm actually talking to another agency about, we'll hopefully produce a story in the next few days about this, actually optimizing for attention and and carbon. Very interesting work coming out in terms of what that means for creative messaging as well, and how this agency describes it as cutting through the clutter. Because obviously you could produce a lot on a TV campaign, which is going to get a lot of attention, but it might be very costly. And actually, it might not be the most carbon sensitive thing to do. You can actually do econometric analysis where you get that sweet spot on the curve to optimize for both. So expect to hear more from agencies about that in the next few months. You'll have obviously probably heard a lot about Project Origin, ISBA's cross-media measurement solution. There was a very good piece by Tom George, the CEO of Origin, on the Media Leader last week, who talked a lot about this idea about comparing apples with apples, and the issues which are faced, and which you might hear more about this afternoon, the issues which are faced, and actually what standards, if we're going to have cross-media measurement across screens and across platforms, what standards are media owners willing to collaborate on, and will that satisfy advertisers? That's the big question. As well as funding and who funds Origin, which you'll need to go to the piece to read more about, but I don't want to get into now. Sea Flight. Just on that, what's coming forward with Origin is currently in trial phase, technical trials, and in Q2 they're going to move to having further trials of 5 advertisers involved: Procter & Gamble, Unilever, BT, PepsiCo, and L'Oreal. And then we expect beta trials are going to happen at the end of this year with 30 advertisers, then a full rollout expected in 2024. It's going to be very exciting to see what happens with that as a truly cross-media measurement solution. Sea Flight, you may have heard as well, the TV broadcasters. This is something that came out of NBC Universal and adopted by Sky in the UK. And they, in the UK, launched a joint venture with ITV and Channel 4 to actually offer deduplicated offline and online TV measurement, audience measurement tools for TV. It takes 10 days after the last spot of a campaign that is aired that media agencies will get a Sea Flight report. It's currently in trial phase, in beta phase, to account for all time-shifted impacts and attribution data for campaigns that are between 5 and 65 days. Key question for that is, does it actually, with everything we're talking about, cross-media measurements, how much is that going to satisfy what advertisers have been pushing for in terms of real-time measurement across different areas of media? And interestingly also, the bottom one is out-of-home playouts, which you may or may not have heard about. This is something which is probably going to be rolled out in July. It's a centralized system for tracking and verifying all out-of-home advertising, which was commissioned by out-of-home body Outsmart, forgive me. It will contain information about all ads that have been played on sites owned by the big 4 outdoor media companies, and the hope is that it's going to become a one-stop shop for all out-of-home planning, buying and research, and in theory provide route data to use for econometric analysis as well. So lots going on. I told you I wasn't a media researcher or an expert in this field, but what I can tell you is we're going to be doing a lot more in this area because it is spicy, interesting, continues to hot up, and of course I'm going to plug myself right now. So follow the Media Leader on our various social media networks, and the website, and our daily newsletter where measurement always features. And so now I will hand to John Moulding, who's going to interview Simon Moore from Dreams. Thank you very much.